one. So.
We could start now? We could start? Hello, we're going to start this session, the Earth Law, Advancing at Ecocentric Paradigms to Address the Climate Crisis. We're going to have a panelist, Tony Sell from Earth Law Center, Herman Green from the Center for Ecocide Studies, and Rachel Adam from Israel Environmental Minister. My name is Bernice Cunningham from the Planting Change Foundation.
Good morning. We are in the COP, in the Solutions Day, and I hope we will have a fruitful debate. My name is Eduardo Salazar. I come from Ecojusticia. I am based in Spain, but I work together with many lawyers around the world.
Let me introduce myself. Yes? No?
Hello?
Hello?
There we are.
Hello, Tony.
Well, let me say good morning from Boston, Massachusetts. My name's Tony Zell. I'm an earth lawyer, along with Herman Green and Rochelle Adam, who are on this panel with us today, and Grant Wilson, the executive director of the Earth Law Center. We edited the book, Earth Law, Emerging Ecocentric Law. We did this, we began about 5 years ago. We published just over 2 years ago. And we now have law schools, universities all over the world using our text. Before becoming an earth lawyer, I was in the United States a trial lawyer and an appellate lawyer, and spent about 30 years face-to-face with judges and juries, trying to persuade them what was right and what was wrong. And this morning here in Boston, afternoon in Sharm el-Sheikh, I'll try to persuade you all why Earth Law is the paradigm to address the climate crisis. And I'll pass it on to Herman. Please introduce yourself. With your microphone on, please.
So I'm Herman Green. I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. That's on the East Coast of the United States. I was a corporate lawyer. I did that for almost 40 years. Prior to becoming a corporate lawyer, I was studied theology and worked with an ecumenical agency in Chicago, working in the inner city of Chicago, and also working with churches in the 60s and 70s on dealing with social issues. I met a man named Thomas Berry in 1982 while I was practicing law in New York. He's calls himself a geologian. He's was an ecologist and a Catholic priest, and has been a mentor to many people on human-earth relations. Through him, I became involved in a project in Florida to start an Earth Jurisprudence Center at Berry University in Orlando, Florida. And then in 2018, I was connected with the Earth Law Center and worked on the textbook, and have been involved with the Earth Law Center ever since.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Rochelle Adam. I'm one of the 4 co-editors of our book, Earth Law. And I want to just clarify that I don't work for the Israel's Environment Ministry anymore. I'm here in Jerusalem, but I'm on the board of, here I would say I'm representing Earth Law Center. So I've been working with rights of nature for about 25 years. It started in 2004 when I was involved in amending Israel's water law that granted legal status to Israel's streams, springs, and wetlands. And I moved on from the government to founding my own NGO. I really believe in that NGOs can do a lot of great work. And one of our first incident was that we had to save forest land that was the habitat of Israel's gazelle, which is a species endemic to Israel. And I was able to fulfill my dream from law school to that. I was very inspired by Christopher Stone's book, Should Trees Have Standing? And we did it here, Should Gazelles Have Standing? And the gazelle went to court with 5 humans and we won. And until this day, our gazelle here in Jerusalem enjoys its own habitat. I went on to do my doctorate in international environmental law. And today, among other things, I'm teaching environmental law at Hebrew University's law school, which has evolved into an earth law course or an ecological law course. It's more of a critique on existing environmental law. Okay, so that's it for now.
Thank you so much, Rachel. So we're going to start with the down. You could start. Erman, you could start with the presentation.
Would you maybe
do you want to introduce yourselves, Bernice and Eduardo?
Okay, my name is Bernice Cunningham. I'm the director of the Planting Change Foundation, and I am a member of Environmental Law Alliance Worldwide. I work currently in Nicaragua, and we work in climate litigation in Mexico as well. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Eduardo Salazar Ortuño. I am doctor, PhD in access to justice under the Aarhus Convention. I am also member of the Environmental Law Alliance Worldwide, like Bernice. I am professor also since 10 years ago, and I am working now for Ecojusticia. Ecojusticia is an organization who want to enforce the law, but also we will enforce the law through the rights of nature, because I am member of the commission who start the proceeding to get a new state law in Spain in order to grant rights for the coastal lagoon Mar Menor. So we have in Spain already an ecocentric new law passed by the Congress and the Senate, and we can say that it is the first ecosystem in Europe that have this legal personhood. And I am very proud of Teresa Vicente, which is the professor who started the proceeding, but I was helping. We are together, and we want to share with you this hope for environmental law enforcement, which is the rights of nature. Thank you.
So perhaps you can kick it off by just explaining what it means to take an ecocentric approach to law and how it relates to the climate crisis.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my screen for a minute. So this I like this picture because it indicates that that life is a series of flows and processes, and they're interconnected. It's a very different image than our kind of angular images that we have of the world that humans have made. And the issue that we're all dealing with is re-embedding the human in the natural world, understanding that we're part of a larger community of life. For years, we've treated, at least in my culture, we've treated nature as a group of objects for use, and now we're discovering that we're part of a much larger system. And this is a picture of how I came to Earth Law. And I think you have a picture of your own. This is a lake in Florida. This was a place I spent a lot of time when I was growing up. And it's a picture of an ant lion, which makes a little hole in the ground. And then the other ants come and fall into the hole, and the earth lion then eats them. And this was where I spent a lot of time with a little straw trying to touch the antlion and get him to snap his pincers. So I think all of us come to Earth Law through some experience of the natural world, one that we've often forgotten, but we come back to and realize that this is a primordial experience that we have. I also have a picture of a turtle here. The turtles in our pond would stick their necks up, and we had speedboats and did skiing, and so people would use shotguns to kill the turtles, and that seemed natural when I was growing up. That's what you would do. That you'd get rid of the turtles so the speedboats could own the pond. So there's a concept called, well, we all know about racial discrimination, but there's also a concept called epistemic discrimination, which is that the Western way of knowing the world is not the only way of knowing the world, that there's other ways of knowing that are much more embedded in the natural world. And that's an ecocentric view, to see this as our kin. We would have a very different relationship to the turtle if we saw the turtle as our kin in all these systems. I came to the Earth Law through these people. I mention them because they're relevant to ecocentrism. Through my pastor, Finley Schaaf, I met Thomas Berry at the top, and he's kind of the cornerstone of the modern movement to Earth Law. He said that the primary flaw in human development is that we've given all the rights to humans. We've separated ourselves off from the natural world and given no rights to nature. Cormac Cullinan lives in South Africa, and he developed a book called Wild Law, which is amazing. It was basically stating that we have our human laws, like we stop at stop signs, and we can't injure other humans. But he said there's a different kind of law, and it's the way that the natural world works. So we have this spectrum of seeing nature as an instrument for our use to seeing ourselves embodied in a much larger community. These people pioneered Earth Law. Liz Hoskin with the Gaia Foundation in London. They've worked on this for a long time, even going back to the 80s. The basic idea of Earth Law is that we have to have nature at the table and to be taken into account in its own right. And Liz and many others have learned a lot from Indigenous people and their ways of knowing. Again, for us, Westerners or people who've been influenced by the Western perspective, we see these things as being outside of ourselves instead of being our kinfolk. So how that becomes embodied in law is what we've been involved with and continue to be involved with. Pat Seaman started the Earth Jurisprudence Center in Florida. So when I received a call to do the textbook in 2018, I realized a lot has changed since the 1970s. The 1970s, when in most nations the major environmental laws were passed. In the United States, we've only had one major law since that time. And there it was to try to deal with the negative side effects of industrial development. But now we see it as a much different issue, that we need a new grounding for law, even going to the ontology of law. So we had moved from an ontology of separation to an ontology of entanglement and interdependence. And we're now dealing with the causes, not the symptoms, which is the case with environmental law. And we're moving to a new ecological social contract, where the contract of law is not just with other humans, but with the natural world. And it's not just law, it has to do with governance. So we can't really change the legal system just by changing the legal system. We have to change our entire way of knowing and being and relating to the world. And all the institutions of society, from schools to churches to these other institutions, have to be involved in governance. So there's major changes in the way we think about law, from a collection of objects to a communion of subjects, from the idea that all rights belong to humans to the rights of nature. The rights of nature means that is obligations for humans. And from the Anthropocene, the idea that humans are at the center of the world, to the ecozoic or ecology, the community of life is at the center of the world. And then we need to move from the Anthropocene to an ecozoic era, which is a time of mutually enhancing relations among humans and the larger community of life and life systems.
Thank you, Herman, for that introduction. I will simply add that ecocentric law, earth law, requires human laws and legal systems to balance the rights of humankind with the rights of the rest of the earth community. And the basic rights of all beings is that right to exist, the right to have a habitat, and the right to evolve and serve one's purpose in the earth community. Rochelle, did you have a comment on what it means to take an ecocentric approach? You're on mute. Thank you.
Probably the best way to think about taking an ecocentric approach is to think about the current approach, which is anthropocentric, which means man is the center of the world. So we want to do the opposite of what we're doing today in treating, as Herman already said, treating nature as property, treating other species, ecosystems, as objects instead of our biological kin, and treating nature as an externality, as a market failure, where you just regulate and use things like technology or offsets or regulations in order to make up for the harm. But ecological law, it's the opposite. First of all, it does not see nature as property. And if anything, nature is part of us and we're part of nature. And ecological law works according to the laws of nature. So for example, if you take the model of planetary boundaries, ecological law would say that human activities can extend until the planetary boundary for climate change, for the planetary system of climate change, but not beyond that. And that's the opposite of today, where again, nature is seen as an externality, and you can keep on with unlimited economic growth because there will always be ways of dealing with externalities. So that would be my input in how to see ecological law.
Thank you.
And it's just based on kindness and compassion to nature, what we're not doing today.
Thank you very much, Tony, Herman, and Rachel. We go to the second question, which is related to education. It's very important, education, not only for the kids, for the young generations, but for the lawyers, for the judges, for the adults also. So education for Earth law means teaching that Earth needs rights, a key element of Earth law. Can you explain, the three of you, can you explain in more depth why Earth needs rights and how would this apply to the climate crisis?
Should I start? Should I go ahead? Yeah. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to start by saying that Earth already has rights. It's not a question of whether giving Earth rights or not giving Earth rights. It has rights, but our current laws don't recognize those rights. So we need, again, ecologically based laws that will recognize these rights, as well as Earth's capacity to support, does not have unlimited capacity to support our civilization. And again, that respects planetary boundaries. So what does it mean to give? There are a lot of people who, my colleagues, for instance, really don't, they feel differently about me from how I feel about rights for nature. Well, I do think it's inherent to nature to have rights. Pragmatically speaking, it's more of like leveling the playing ground, because if corporations have rights, then nature definitely should have rights, because today corporation is legally entitled to cause egregious harm, injury to nature, and nature can't fight back. So giving rights to nature would make it more even. Would give, instead of empowering just corporations, it would empower rights. Rights are empowerment. We see that in rights for women to gain the vote, rights for against slavery, to give people the right to vote. So rights-based legal systems are very strong today, and nature has to be part of it. Tony, did you want to add something?
Thank you, Rochelle. Yes, our extant legal systems are based on rights. And rights are very much an evolving concept. Corporations didn't have rights 100 years ago. Nature did not have rights anywhere 20 years ago. Perhaps in some indigenous legal systems, but of course, those aren't rights-based. Earth, ecosystems, individual, non-human nature needs rights to be a stakeholder in modern legal systems. Modern legal systems are based on rights. However, Earth only needs rights because of the legal systems that are controlling the way humankind interacts these days. Right now, these legal systems give rights to humans, to nation states, to corporate bodies, to destroy the earth. This is a legal right. You need a permit, perhaps to pollute, to extract, to harvest timber, but those are legal rights that are accorded in legal systems to humankind. As long as legal systems put human rights, anthropocentric rights, at the top of the pyramid, it won't really change the way we live. We need to recognize that Earth should not need rights, because legal systems should not be based on rights. Legal systems ought to be based on duties, on obligations that stem from relationships. To ensure Earth's relationship with humankind will continue, humankind must reciprocate what we receive from the Earth. We must put as much effort into supporting and sustaining Earth as a healthy, vital, evolving being as Earth puts into supporting humankind. Would you like to continue there, Herman?
So what came to mind was reciprocity. So the problem with our current legal system is that we have no way of representing certain things that are important. We haven't yet spoken about the rights of future generations, but that's also very much an issue here because we're I might argue a bit about whether Earth can fight back. Earth will fight back. Earth is not just mother, it's other. Ultimately, we're going to have to respect nature because we're proceeding in a way that won't be sustainable over the long run. One of the most exciting things is to see this movement grow. I mean, just to be on this stage with Bernice and Eduardo and people all over the world that are beginning to think this way. The voices of Indigenous people coming forward, the voices of women, and also the voices of nature. And that takes, talk about education, that takes some real education, is how to listen to the natural world. So Earth law is not just a matter of external laws to manage nature, it's to be able to hear the voice of nature. And so our legal system has to, and not just our legal system, but our entire educational system has to be ecologically based. And by ecology, it's not just looking at it from the outside, it's learning how to, as I did when I was a child, being enticed, enchanted, engaged with, understand myself as being part of a larger community.
Thank you so much. And with that reflections, you make me think, and that law is not a representation of justice. That law is a representation of power. And Tony, you mentioned it very good that they're giving rights to pollute. And we see it here in the conference when you see 600 lobbyists from the polluting companies come here and try to influence the negotiations and try to block the negotiations. And one thing it comes in my mind is the indigenous people. The indigenous people constituency law always say that
Eduardo moderando.
Earth is in the center of this. So now I will go to the third questions, and this will be how you see ecosystem approach could solve the climate crisis, and if you could give us some specific examples.
I'd be happy to take this one on first. It is with great admiration of my co-editors and the many people, more than 100, who contributed to the Earth Law course book. We designed this book to respond to the climate crisis. That's what has brought forth the development of Earth Law. And it very much supports the development of Earth Law, which is this emerging body of law. It is rights of nature, rights of future generations, indigenous legalities, guardianship. These elements of the law seek to preserve and protect and restore ecosystems to balance. Earth law is based on the belief that harmony with nature can be restored. Modern law, extant modern law, is based on the belief that we can take and take and take and take and never give back and continually improve human civilization. I think science has come to recognize resoundingly that is a false assumption. The changes within the extant legal systems will foster the emergence of new legal systems. When we begin to give rights to nations, when we begin to give rights to future generations, when the voice of nature is an element of discussions in corporate boardrooms, in governmental agencies, that's when we will begin to give consideration to the health of the planet in which we and Earth and all the members of the community will evolve together. We can't, as humankind, continue to develop separate from nature. I seriously contend that the development of ecocentric law, of Earth law, will be as earth-shattering as the Ten Commandments. This new way of living in concert with laws that take into consideration the voice of nature will catalyze changes in society. It'll catalyze changes in culture, changes in economics, politics, finance, and perhaps most importantly, it will begin to catalyze change in community building. These are changes in the way humans view themselves. And this is a key concept of ecocentric law that will clearly advance our efforts to stem climate change. Earth law is based on a belief in consciousness-altering systemic change. Changing the way one thinks will lead to changes in the way the world works. And I'll give one example before passing this on to my co-panelists. In 2019, the Dutch Supreme Court ruled in favor of an argument brought by a nonprofit organization, the Urgenda Foundation. The Urgenda Foundation represented not only the citizens of the Netherlands, but future generations of the citizens of the Netherlands. And the Urgenda Foundation claimed that the government, the political bodies, the legislature and the executive branch owed a legal duty to its citizens, including future generations, to mitigate climate change. It reasoned, based on the European Convention of Human Rights, the Dutch Constitution, and other European Union legal standards. This is how Earth law comes into development. This is a trite statement, but it certainly is thinking outside of the box. It is examining other ways to address the problems that we simply establish through our own regulatory systems. The decision by the Dutch Supreme Court was the first to recognize the rights of future generations, and more importantly, it compelled the political branches, imposed on the political branches the obligation of that nation's government to protect the citizenry. What I put out there for consideration for anyone listening, what might you do to compel your nation to recognize the rights of future generations, and more importantly, your nation's government to recognize an obligation to protect those rights? Rochelle?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. So, yeah, I want to talk about the climate litigation. So thanks for moving ahead with this. And why is there so much climate litigation going on? Because there's like a government failure to take care. Governments are failing their populations. And the climate, they totally failed in stopping climate change and stopping this terrible crisis, even though they've known about it for at least 50, 60 years. And they failed us. And that's because they prefer their rich corporations to their own people. And when governments start caring more about their own people than they care about corporations and money, then then they'll do something about climate change. And this extends to nature as well. It's not that governments don't care about nature. They failed nature and they failed people. And climate litigation, it's really trying to bridge this gap in governance by going to the courts. And the hope is that courts will answer this cry and fill in the gap. And they did that there, and we have wonderful examples all over the world now, from Germany, from the Netherlands, that courts are saying, no, this is governments, you have to take this more seriously, you have to stop carbon emissions. And And they're finding that not only do governments have a duty of care, but corporations have a duty of care as well towards the citizens of that particular country or to the global population. And what I'm hoping for is that this climate litigation will expand from working for humans, will expand from working for human rights, will expand to working for rights of nature as well. There's a definite nexus between climate change and between biodiversity loss and species loss, and we have to interconnect it. And hopefully the courts, they're starting to wake up. Judges, if you talk about climate education, it's probably more important at this stage for judges than any other sector of our countries, because they're really on the line right now. Whatever, I mean, there are so many. Today there are 1,500, even more, climate litigation cases. While 5 years ago there were only 800. The numbers have doubled. So we need judges who understand ecological laws, earth law, not just rights of humans, but rights of nature as well. Herman, do you want to add anything, or should we go on to another question? Or
Yeah, I do. I want to go back to what Bernice said, that the legal system is a system of power relationships, and it's allocation of power and privilege. So what is failing now is it's not primarily the legal system, its development is failing. As Thomas Berry says, a rising gross world product in terms of economic terms, while you have a declining gross natural product, is an absurdity. And the legal system that we have is what protects that. It protects property rights, it protects investors, it protects companies. It has evolved over the last 250 years to be an instrument by which development proceeds. There's a concept of not just landscapes, but lawscapes. So law has shaped, when you see something that's on the land now, that has been allowed, privileged by law. And also the means of dispute resolution are also in favor of those people that have money that can use the legal system. And then there's another system outside of it, which is power. We have so many people who are fighting for nature who are being killed. So the legal system has to be reformed, but it has to be reformed out of an entirely different mindset. It's something that won't happen right away. There's a need for immediate litigation, the kinds of climate litigation that we're talking about. But there's a larger need for a new understanding of law and how it can be embedded in nature and in local communities and in multiple worldviews, not just in one.
Thank you very much, Tony, Herman, and Rachel, for your answers. It's clear that property rights needs to be reviewed because it comes from the Roman laws. I mean, we are advancing with rights of nature. We could advance with social or spiritual or ecological function of property rights, but maybe it's too late to wait for this change, and then maybe it's good to advance with rights of nature. I have an example in Murcia with the Mar Menor case. We collected more than 600,000 signatures in pandemia, and this is an example of mobilization. This is an example of awareness, empowerment. What you were saying just before. I have the fourth question, maybe the last. I don't know. is what are examples of ways that education can enable local communities to protect natural ecosystem to both mitigate and adapt to climate change.
Rochelle, why don't you kick this one off?
Sure. Yeah, well, I very much believe in the power of local communities to make change. And the first thing to do is to turn citizens into what's called citizen scientists, which means they get out to their local forests and they really get to know it well. Because when you get to know something well, you start to appreciate it and to love it, and you don't want anything bad happening to it. And I'm just drawing on my own experiences from our own community in really saving the population of gazelles that live in the forest behind where we live. And we tracked them and we learned a lot about them, and we brought out zoologists and ecologists to teach us both about the animals and about its habitats and about its ecosystems. And we reached the degree that we were even able, about 7 years ago, to turn to the IUCN, to their red lists. They have red lists, international global red lists of species that are endangered. And we were able to persuade them with data that we had collected and with research from scientists who had helped us out to upgrade the gazelle from threatened to endangered. So today, the mountain gazelle is globally endangered. And that has really added to its protection, not only of the animal itself, but of its habitat and the ecosystems. And this was because of people who decided they wanted to learn more about what was going on in their own community and stuck to it. So that would be one of, I would say, turn people into citizens or citizen scientists and get them to know their communities, the nature of their community. Start on a local level. Tony, you want to add to that?
I'm happy to pick it up from there. I live in a city outside of Boston called Newton, Massachusetts. For 30 years now, we've had a local organization called Green Newton. And Green Newton began as a rather small organization, much like a parent-teachers association, working with families, working with students to begin to understand, and this was 30 years ago, what was wrong with the way we were living, why there was so much pollution, why we couldn't swim in the local lakes and rivers. Community organizations have been around for a long time. And what we need to do as educators is point them in a direction that dramatically shifts the way we look at education. We've been so programmed to send our children to school, to put them inside, and to talk to them and show them pictures and videos of nature. Well, while I don't suggest there's anything wrong with that, why don't we encourage our students to sit in the forest, to walk near the river, to try to listen to those voices that we all know nature has? We don't have to listen, we don't have to hear the words of a plant to say it's thirsty. We can look at its wilting leaves. We don't have to listen or hear in language we understand from a river, or in human language from a river, that she's dying. We can see it as the flow diminishes. What we must do is change our individual consciousness and re-engage with nature. If we think about the strength of our Indigenous brothers and sisters' connections with the land and the water and the air and the sun and the moon, if we begin to focus more on our own consciousness altering experiences so that we're not simply thinking, our conscious cognitive processing is not just about what we see and read, and it's about what we can feel, what we can intuitively communicate with nature. This is how I think we will most effectively enable local communities to protect natural resources, by protecting natural resources, to live with them, to feel with them, to feel the heartening warmth that comes from an awareness that nature speaks.
Thank you very much, Tony. Herman, feel you free to express your opinion.
Yes, I would like to, but I actually I wrote that question, or maybe I adapted that question with Bernice in mind, because I know this is what he does, and I would love to hear from him. And then I also have some words to say. But Bernice, this is what you're doing. So could you tell us what you're doing?
Yes. Okay, so basically, we're working with kids because we think the law is built in culture, not just in the books. And we're working with them to train them and how are the rights of the law. And we're also doing training and scientific work. They doing that. We build a water lab so they could test. And we have test water in the community, and we have find that the water in the communities are contaminated. And with that, we had built a policy document that we take to the authorities, and now they're training all their community on how to treat this water with chlorination. With such simple steps, we could have a huge impact. So in my country, it's very hard to go to litigation and to go to these tribunals. So what we did is we go into the schools to try to build the law into the culture, to try to teach the kids, because when they learn from early age what's their rights and that they shouldn't throw garbage, that they shouldn't pollute the water, they will grow and be applying the law. Because in Latin America, we have a problem. We have beautiful laws, but they're like poetry. They're like poetry. They're not like implemented law. And so we don't want to make laws that are poetry. We want to make laws that are feasible and that we could be implemented. And I think from the Latin American perspective, that education is a powerful tool to do that. So that's a bit a context of what we're doing. Thank you, Hernan.
That's so great. I really love that thing that you say the laws are like poetry. I'm not at COP27, but I did go to Rio Plus 20 and was involved in the 3-year process from there to the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals. So the UN documents are also like poetry. They say all the right things, but we go on living. I was impressed by a special I saw on TV about artisanal fishermen in Latin America and the adapting marine protected areas. At first, the idea was, well, we ought to be able to fish where we want. We ought to be able to catch as much as what we want. But they were shown over time that if they set aside protected areas where no fishing was allowed, that only protected the fish in the area that was being protected, but it also increased the fish outside that area. So you have foreign fishermen coming into the area, and they don't care. They don't care about what happens to that area. All they want to do is get as much as they can and move on to somewhere else. But the local people who are dependent on that as a food source, they care. So that the power has to be shifted to the local people. So law does have this, it's legitimate use of power. We do need strong legal systems, but the power needs to be moved back to the people and to the idea that we're supporting ourselves out of our local areas. And when we have that, when we can see and affect what's going on in our local areas, it's very different than looking at the world as a collection of resources where you can go wherever you want, exploit as much as you want, and get as much as you want and get paid for it. So we need an entirely different approach to law. Someone said that we have vertical power, and we see that in the world today, the hierarchies that we have, and that the way to counter vertical power is through horizontal power. So you could say that that we have this existing legal system which privileges these hierarchical relationships, but the way to combat that is at the local level through horizontal power. That's where the change will ultimately come about, and that's a kind of law itself. I'll just make one more point that Earth law is not just about written positive law. It's about customary law. It's about practices. It's not just learning. It's not just even just being in nature. It's learning practices. That's where Tony says we need to go from rights to duties. What are the practices that we need to follow? And that those will be developed at the local level.
So thank you very much. This was the last question from the moderators, but maybe someone in the room or someone who is connected want to point out some question. Maybe Eduardo.
Okay, so we don't have any more questions. I don't know if you want to make your closing remarks to this event. And thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to interchange this vision from the Western world. The indigenous communities have their own vision of the law, and they always see Earth as a part of their ecosystem. So I think these discussions that we're having here, the indigenous people are used to it, are used to be seeing the water and seeing the trees as part of their life, and they don't feel that Earth is part of them. They feel that they are part of Earth. They have a totally different approach, and that's the reason why the forest and the indigenous territories are so well kept through this era.
Okay, my last comment is for you three, Tony, Herman, and Rachel, or Rachel, Tony, and Herman. Thank you very much for bringing hope. We need to bring hope. We are here in Samechek hearing many things. They are not so positive. We don't know which will be the results of this convention, of this meeting for 40,000 persons. We are here looking for solutions, but you are bringing hope. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm going to start, and then others can finish. One of the things we do want to emphasize is the importance of the book that we've published. It's called Earth Law, Emerging Ecocentric Law, A Guide for Practitioners. It's the first time that there has been a law book that's collected all the theories that are being used around the world for bringing rights to nature and for resetting the relationships that humans have with the natural world through the legal system, but also through ecological governance and an ecological social contract. The purposes of Earth law, unlike our present laws, which are to facilitate human commerce and protect our bodies and so forth, is to live within planetary boundaries, to prospectively, not just immediately, but prospectively care for ecosystems, preserve biodiversity, restore damaged ecosystems and loss of biodiversity, protect human environmental rights, and justly share the burdens of mitigating and adapting to climate change and other environmental stresses, and to make sure that nature has a seat at the table.
Rochelle, you want to go next?
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know, Tony, if you want to make some closing remarks, or Rachel.
Why don't
Yeah,
you go, Michelle? Yeah.
sure. I know we already almost reached the end of our time. I just want to emphasize the power of the public, of the non-governmental organizations and people, because as I said previously, when government fails, we've got to be out there to take care of ourselves. So, and hopefully the courts will help us, and we'll do it. We can. I feel that we can do this. Yeah. So thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Tony?
Sure. Bernice and Eduardo, thank you so much. I'd also like to thank Lauren Tarr, a member of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, who's made this possible for us, who advocated for the Earth Law Center and got this panel the opportunity to speak. What I'd like to say in summing up is that there's so much opportunity to develop ecocentric law. What it begins with is learning the nuts and bolts, the origins, the fundamentals. It then proceeds to understanding the threshold obstacles, property law, the ownership concept, standing, the right for a being to even have a voice in legal proceedings, guardianship. How might we, as human beings, express the voice of the Earth community? And then the legal theories, and we espouse so many through rights of nature and rights of future generations, through completely new frameworks that will lead to this ecological social contract. And ultimately what our book presents is case studies. More than 12 countries have already in depth begun to explore these concepts of ecocentric law. And I believe it's been pointed out, writing the law, even at the constitutional level, doesn't in and of itself effectuate the change we need. It has to be implemented. It has to be enforced. And like all common law, it has to be modified to the circumstances. In courts of law, we decide cases on the facts of that case. And perhaps it creates precedent, but it's the facts of the case. And this is my final point. We as lawyers, we are strategic thinkers. My practice was strategic litigation. We didn't bring a case until we developed a strong belief in the success of that case. Or, even if there was not a strong likelihood of success, a strong belief in the power of precedent. Now, this is somewhat of a difficult concept because precedent is by its very nature an element that retards the progressive development of the law. So that, of course, relying on precedent holds to what exists, but creating precedent paves the landscape for changes in the law. So what I urge all of you to do is, number one, look at our book. If you're interested, we will be presenting a summer course as we have the last 2 summers, and we'll certainly publicize that. And think strategically, whether you are a lawyer or not. Think about laws, think about rights, think about obligations that might become the law, and devote yourself to that simple thought process. Change the way you think. Imagine a world where you stand before a court of law or in a parliament or before an executive and explain, this is what the river wants. River wants to provide water for humankind, for all of our uses. It also wants to provide a habitat for all aquatic life and all the floral life. And it wants to provide water for farmers. The water knows what the water wants. We as humankind must bring that voice into the legal process.
I'll just add one thing. If you want to be in touch with us, go to earthlaw.org and you can follow up on this.
Thank you so much. And I guess this is the end. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.